Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. I'm your host, Bill Lundgren, and I'm glad to have you aboard today. We're going to continue what we did the last session in talking about advocating for yourself, but I'm going to take it in a different direction this time to, I hope, be more helpful to everybody. Because when I did it last time, we were talking about advocating in terms of coming to a therapist's office and so forth. But underneath that, there's some other stuff that we have to pay attention to that's in pretty general. So I think, and I'm checking in, is Jonathan on with me today? Jonathan Price, our producer.
Hey, Bill.
Hey there. Thank you. What I want to do today, Jonathan, is talk about what causes us to not advocate for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because, some people say, well, I'm a procrastinator. That's not really the answer.
Right.
Because we have to ask ourselves some questions. For example, okay, why am I procrastinating in asking people for things that I need?
Yep.
And there's a variety of answers to that. And part of the reason I'm asking people to ask themselves the question, rather than stopping at procrastination and say that's the end of the story. If we have an understanding that really, if we want to do something like go out and get an ice cream cone, we're not going to procrastinate the way we might in asking for direction to the therapist's office.
Right.
Or anything else that we may ask people. And there's a whole variety of reasons that we do that. I know for myself, there are some things I really procrastinate with, like learning how to use the iPhone. Even though I've had one for years, I still haven't, learned to use it in the way that everybody else seems to be able to. And it has to do, one, it's not, when I look at it, I don't know what to start with. And particularly since I can't see the screen, I have to use voiceover. And so I have to move my fingers all around, and it's just very complicated for me, and I get very frustrated very easily. But I need to address that rather than the idea of my being a procrastinator. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. The art of procrastination is something that is not lost on me.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it really comes down to, and I hate to, let the cat out of the bag too early, but really procrastination is just a decision. And some people will chalk it up to their quote unquote behavior or their personality. Right. I'm just a procrastinator. Like, no, you're not. You're not you choose to go to, like in your case, ice cream or therapy. I mean, those are two very big differences, but at the end of the day, you choose whether or not you want to get a project done, get something done on time, because you obviously have thought about it. You have a paper due if you're a student. You have a deadline at work. And if you're choosing to procrastinate, that's something that's way deeper than just a procrastination feeling.
Right. And I think when you say choosing, it sounds like it's a matter of will. And this is all under the surface. It's kind of like what we have to do is to stop and say, what is behind this? What is causing me to do it, to procrastinate? Like calling a therapist. Well, for a lot of people, the idea of going to a therapist feels shameful. And we don't want those feelings.
Yeah.
Or you may feel that the therapist won't be able to help you, and you're afraid to find out that indeed there's nothing can be done for you. Or you may believe that what you need to do is to please the therapist. A lot of clients would come in to me. They want to please me, and I have to remind them, I'm not the one to be pleased. I'm glad to see you here, but you're the one who has to be pleased with me. And that's like a novel idea. The point is that we're establishing a relationship, and sometimes when we are entering into a new relationship, it's scary as heck because we feel we're going to fail, or we're not going to please the person, or we're going to, it isn't going to work, and it's going to be my fault. That is your fault, not the therapist or the chemistry or whatever you want to call it. Or we take it on ourselves, or we have a family history where we're people-pleasing, or we're not wanting to be trouble, or not wanting to even address our own problems. It becomes a family history that's what everybody in the family does. And part of our job is to sort out what that is. In fact, as a therapist, that's one of my jobs, is to help you sort out what it is that's keeping you from accomplishing what it is that you want to accomplish.
Well, and in the vein of self-advocacy, we're really hitting on the word fear, and there's a couple of different fear options that we have. One is the fear of failure, which is most common to everybody. You know, it's a fear of looking bad, like you were describing, and a fear of not doing the right thing or saying the right thing or being the right person. And that's a very typical fear that we see. But there's also the fear of success, which was not often talked about. And when people have the fear of success, they put this pressure on themselves that if I succeed, that means I'm going to have more responsibility, and I don't know if I can handle that. If I succeed, I'm going to be put up on this pedestal, and I don't want to be seen as somebody who is up on a pedestal. It's a very weird, I say weird, it's a very interesting dichotomy between the two. And the juxtaposition of fear of success and fear of failure, they kind of come from the same point. They both start with fear, and the opposite of fear is love. And when you can love on yourself, that fear of either succeeding or failure tends to diminish over time. But I don't know, that there's that fear and that drive to be something that either you're not is very palpable and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I'm not sure about love as much as it's for us to be in a different space than we are now. As much as we're uncomfortable with this space, and this space is demanding that we see a therapist or we make changes, it's familiar. And sometimes it's the devil that you know versus the devil you don't know. And that's when the success becomes intimidating. Well, if I succeed, then I don't have any excuses. I don't have, my relationship with myself and with other people may change. And that can be even more fearful than anything else.
Well, there's that age-old quote, you don't know what you don't know until you know what you don't know.
Right.
You know, that's a dangerous spot to be in.
Right. And particularly when it has to do with therapy, but or getting any kind of treatment for anything, like a medical situation.
Yeah.
Someone was just telling me the other day that her boyfriend knows he has to get some help, but he just absolutely is afraid to get it. And he's afraid for a variety of reasons, and he doesn't even take care of himself physically. There's a history of cancer in his family. He's not going to go and check out, and because he's afraid of what he'll find out. And that's the biggest fear. Rather than saying, if I find out, I can do something about it, or I can make sure that the fear that I have isn't realized, that I take care of myself. Big fear, big fear.
Yeah, they're all big fears. And there's, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the known, the fear of all of this kind of stuff. But when it really boils down to it, you've got to be able to make a decision. You have to say, I'm going to better myself. And if you're not going to better yourself, then how much quality of life are you going to have? When you're not advocating for yourself and you're not, there are some people in this world who are completely fine staying on the sidelines.
Yeah.
They're also the ones who tend to complain about the society that we live in without doing anything.
Right.
They're the ones who complain that a sidewalk isn't to ADA code, but they refuse to go to the city meetings that take care of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they're just fine complaining. They're the keyboard warriors behind all the social media content that are, which is a huge reason that I'm not on social media much anymore. But to those people who are going to counseling, congratulations. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so proud of you. I'm so thankful for the humility and the grace that you've given yourself to give yourself a chance to succeed. Now, with that comes a mindset of self-discovery. And when you go on this mindset of self-discovery in this journey, you begin to peel back layer after layer after layer, and you discover things about yourself that you begin to eventually separate truth, what has happened versus the emotions tied to it. Because a lot of times those emotions that are tied to facts are opinions. And I know that's a lot of like weird mumbled jumbled stuff, but I just really want to say I'm proud of you guys for going to counseling and going to therapy and going on that self-discovery journey.
Right. And I agree in terms of courage, but what's interesting as a therapist, and I sit there and I realize that the person is putting up all kinds of barriers to keep me from helping him or her. And unknowingly, and again, that's one of my jobs, is to help people get past that fear that they have. If the person really knows me, and fill in the blanks. But yeah, it's courage to come in. It's courage to do the work that's involved. But if I have to acknowledge to everybody, it's scary to make changes. Mm-hmm. And because, even your relationships may change if you do something, for example, stop drinking. Mm-hmm. And to be able to make that change, you need to understand, take a deep breath and know this is for you. This is taking care of you. And we are not great at self-care. We will care for other people much more quickly than we will for ourselves.
Well, and we'll extend grace to other people much more quickly than ourselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times do the person who has that fear of success often puts the thumb down on their own personal lives, saying, man, I wish I could have done that. I should have done this. I could have done that. The shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like, that's a horrible place to live.
That's right. And, self-care, too, there are family messages that we get that we're not supposed to be so self-involved, as we call it, or that just being selfish. You've got to take care of your brother or sister or whatever before yourself. And these kinds of messages, until we identify they're there, we just, they're nagging in the back of our mind, even though they're not fully developed, until we allow them to be developed. Oh, that's why I do that. Or we learn this kind of behavior from other family members. And, and because our parents operated that way, we assume we're supposed to operate that way, even if it's dysfunctional. And that's, to break the family rules and talk and point out the flaw.
Yeah. Well, that goes to the blaming category. And here we're talking about self-advocacy, and yet we want to point the fingers at other people for our lack of self-advocacy.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. We have to recognize and say, oh, that's why I do it, because everybody in the family did it. But that doesn't mean that now says, now that I know where it's coming from, that gives me the room to change it.
No, I'll agree with you on that. What I'm talking about is when there are people who are going to be making the excuses for their lack of change.
Right.
And I agree with you on that part.
Yeah.
I was talking with Penn a couple of days ago, and we were having this conversation around self-advocacy, ironically enough. And, I had mentioned earlier that the person who wants to complain about the sidewalk not being ADA compliant or, whatever, but they're not willing to go do the things to change. How many times have our listeners, maybe myself, maybe you, have said, oh, I just wish somebody would change that, or that needs to change.
Right.
There's a point at which you have to say, look, I'm going to take charge of this because this is something that I believe in.
Right.
And you go and you affect change, you implement change, you ask questions, you go out and you self-advocate.
And that's work. That's work.
It is. It works. It's hard. It's uncomfortable.
But the result.
Oh. It's like going to the gym and putting in a good workout and getting a good lather. You feel horrible doing it most of the time. Yeah. But you see some pretty amazing results at the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that reinforces when our self-advocacy works, it reinforces our good feeling about our power. We're talking about taking our power, making us do what has to be done to improve the situation. And when it does improve, and sometimes it's very slow and sometimes it's frustrating, but once we achieve what it is we're looking for, there's no feeling like it.
No, there's not. So when I come into your office and I say, Bill, I don't really have to be here. I'm just here. I'm court ordered. I don't really have any anger problems. I don't have any issues going on. My family thinks I do, but they're all crazy anyway. As a therapist, I bet you just kind of lick your chops at those moments and you're like, oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Where do you start with an issue like that or a mindset like that?
Well, that's where I begin to get into some of the specifics. Well, your family feels this way. What examples do they give you? Tell me about them and tell me how they don't apply to you. In other words, I'm not fighting them head on. Right. I'm kind of getting alongside of them and trying to understand their world as they see it in this kind of I don't have a problem mode. And sometimes when they do that, then it's like there's an opening in the door. But you see, we have to, I so seldom have gotten a client that says, I know I need therapy. I'm here and I want you to help me fix myself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they just say, well, my wife said I should do this, or, some family member, or I've been threatened with a divorce, or there's some coercion that's involved.
Sure.
And
which automatically makes those defenses go up. And how are you going to self-advocate with all your defenses in the air?
Right. Exactly. And then I'm part of the I've done a lot of what we call employee assistant professional work, where companies have mandated people to come to see a therapist. And they say, my company said I'm going to be here and I'm going to be fired if I'm not. Well, that's a good way to start. That's a great way to start off a session.
Nothing like a threat to build trust, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But threats sometimes get people into looking at themselves. But that's when I put on the armor and get my shield out and my sword and start hacking away.
Right.
But it's whatever it is our own resistance that we have to deal with. Whatever the situation.
Sure.
That's why, why aren't you getting such and such? Well, what is it in your part? And this is not blame. We're not blaming. Mm-hmm. We're saying, what are the barriers you're seeing or experiencing that keeps you from achieving what it is you think you need? And if we can look at it not as a blame, because, I think a lot of people who have trouble with self-advocacy really feel very shameful of themselves. They don't feel that they're worthy, in more an unconscious level. They say, there's just something wrong with me, why bother? Or I can't do it, why bother? And that's what has to be dispelled. And we can do this by taking small steps. And, you were talking about going to the gym. Well, I have people come in to me and say, well, I want to go to the gym 7 days a week, work out for 2 hours. And I know that's the setup. And so we talk about, well, look, how about if we start with 1 day or 2 days and at 1 hour or what? In other words, small baby steps. Then build up to the level that you think you need to. Because sometimes people find 3 days a week is sufficient to do the things that they want to accomplish. I've had people who, come in and they want to see me every day of the week.
Right.
And that it's not going to work.
Right.
And so consequently, we whittle it down to something that's going to be manageable for them and give them time to practice what they learned with me. And, and it reinforces itself with success.
Sure.
The more they succeed, the more they want to do whatever it is that we're trying to help them do.
Well, and part of the self-advocacy thing is setting the bar at the appropriate height. The level of expectation. Like you were saying, you can't expect to say, okay, I'm going to go work out 7 days a week, 2 hours a day. That's not a realistic goal unless you just have all that time on your hands and you're just one of those unicorns that say that's going to turn the switch on and off. But for 95% of the people out there, it's a slow burn. It's okay, what can I manage today? Can I ask myself a question and change a thought that I had today? Versus I'm going to change my entire personality and philosophy overnight. It just doesn't happen. There's light bulb moments along the way, which are beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
But those light bulb moments need to be fostered, and they need to build the circuitry before they can have that moment of self-realization and discovery.
See, some people get annoyed with me because, like in the case of going to the gym, I say, okay, step number 1, you're going to go and inquire a cost, where it is, decide if that's the gym that you like, and, is that going to work? Investigate a couple of gyms, and that's going to be your task for this week. And sometimes they come in and say, oh, I can only go to one place. They say, well, you did one place, okay, so the next one. And make small challenges for people so they always feel like they're being successful.
Well, and on the other side of that success, give yourself a reward. Like,
Yeah.
there's no rule stating that you can't give yourself a reward for doing something that was difficult. I mean,
Right.
unless you're a kid and you're, trying to do this on your parents' dime, but
Yeah.
take yourself for, I know this is a horrible one, but take yourself for ice cream after you go work out, right? That's not, it's not what I'm prescribing, but
There's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's just one.
yeah, you don't need 17 Krispy
you,
Kreme donuts.
Right. Or Voodoo Donut down the street, and buy a whole box of them.
Oh man!
But the got you started. You're ready to hop in the car,
one with the Fruit
right?
Loops and like the Reese's peanut butter cups on them. Like, oh my gosh! It's a good thing it's almost lunchtime.
Well, but the thing is, even in terms of reward, and you say, oh well, if I work out, then I'm going to buy a quart of ice cream or whatever. It's no. What you want to do is measure your reward so that there's more reward ahead.
Yeah.
And you're not going to undo what you're doing. But if the other piece is saying, give yourself praise, and this is so hard for people, for many people, unless they're narcissists, to be willing to say, I did it right.
Oh yeah.
I went to that therapist. I didn't like him or her, but I stuck it out. And now I'm beginning to like the person. And I know my resistance was making it difficult. I'm getting past it. Whew.
Yeah.
Guess what I did?
Well, that's why I said at the very beginning that the opposite of fear and the direct combatant of fear is love. And when you can love on yourself, even if you don't love yourself at the very beginning, there's at least this little spark that says, okay, I need to change something in my life. Either someone, my company, courts, whatever, my kids, insert whatever, is making me go to therapy, or I'm perceiving that they're making me go to therapy. Once you're in that situation, though, and you start to realize how much love you have for yourself, it becomes this self-fulfilling, amazing prophecy that the more you keep doing it, the more you keep going. And the more those reward things, the more dopamine and serotonin get released into your body. And it just becomes this wonderful, I guess I'm going to use the word, it's a wonderful addiction to love on yourself and to care for yourself.
Well, sometimes that can be a leap, but that's what we're heading for.
Right.
But I have to tell a story of a gentleman who went into his family coerced him to go see a physician, and the physician, because of his disagreeable demeanor in their mind. And he goes to the doctor and says, the people are just really on my back. They're insisting I do something. I'm fine. And the doctor gives him a prescription. And he comes back a couple of weeks later, and the doctor said, well, how did this prescription work? He said, no effect on me, but everybody around me is so much more pleasant.
Oh, that's good.
He didn't quite get the message, but he's guessing the result. And then he's going to, take some time for him to understand his skin in the game.
That's good.
But for the moment, he sees something different happening, so that reinforces him to continue what he's doing.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, bringing the mind with it, you get the body going and the mind will follow.
Well,
and that's where that.
What would you say is your number one tip as we close this out for those who are looking for that sense of self-advocacy?
I think the biggest tip is to decide what you want, result you want, and take and enumerate small steps, a few small steps to take, because as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And what step can you manage the beginning? Then you'll see all the other things will follow after that. And, just be real aware of what it is that you want to accomplish.
I think for me, it's what Penn says at the end of her shows. It's be kind to somebody else, be kind to yourself. It's good for your soul. And
That's right.
When you take those little tiny steps to even change one small thing about yourself, about your life, your routines, see if it works. If it does, great. Move on. If it doesn't, that's fine. Move on.
Move on. Yeah. Yeah. Empower yourself to make those kinds of choices. We have much more power than we think we do.
That's right.
Yep. Okay. So on to our discussion to help people take a look at themselves and how they're going to accomplish what it is that they want to do. We'll be doing that off and on during this our programming. We think about you. We hope that what we're sharing is helpful for you. Let us know. We have a feedback at aftersight.org. You can also call us on the feedback line. That's 720-712-8856. Let us know if there's something we're missing, something you want us to include, or comment, praises, negative comments are also accepted, because we can look at them and say, okay, we need to change this. So on behalf of Jonathan and myself, I look forward to connecting with you with the next episode.